What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Homie Hangout, where we help others move in excellence. And I'm going to do a brief video on Mexican Mafia member Mark Quiroz, aka Tortuga or Turtle, out of Colton. I don't think that it's incriminating in any way to identify him as such. He's been validated as a MM member, since the 90s. I believe he went to Pelican Bay 92, 94. Nonetheless, uh, I did time with him, right? I was in Pelican Bay at the same time as him. He lived downstairs, I lived upstairs. And, we were all there for years together. So we kind of got to know each other. And I think this video, this brief story about him, I think highlights some of the ways in which folks related back there in that environment. I was back there for being validated as a Nuestra Raza / Northern Structure prison gang member. So obviously, the inmate and us, we were enemies, right? Just flat out. And yet we lived and coexisted in this space. So I started doing legal work in large part when I hit Pelican Bay. According to the rules that I lived up under, we were required to challenge anything that got in the way of us acquiring and maintaining a mainline status. Obviously, validation is certainly counts. And so I filed 602s, this and that, challenged my validation, and actually wound up going on to have appeals court and getting an order to show cause and getting assigned an attorney, which was worthless. I beat my validation a couple times, but I never got released from the SHU because then I was considered under investigation. And they came out with new 1030s, right? I got some 1030s tossed out. 1030s are confidential forms. So they're forms in which some unnamed confidential informant who CDC says has proven to provide reliable information in the past states something about you, right? So I had 1030 stating that I was a prison gang member. That's what most of them said. And then there was 1030 stating that I had, told people to do certain things that were against the rules. So anyways, that's where I really got into. I got into the legal work, and that's relevant to the story about Tortuga because I also wound up helping other people. And so there was a northerner. He wasn't an hermano, right? He wasn't a bro. I guess now they're called Norteños, whatever language you want to use. He was a northerner, but he had been validated as an associate, and he held his mud, right? He didn't debrief, he didn't tell, so he stayed back there in the SHU like everybody else. I'm not going to identify him because I don't know his standing or how he's living his life, and so I don't really want to put him on blast. But he's a northerner. He's out of the town of Milpitas. No, he doesn't have a YouTube channel, just in case anybody's wondering. And so he had been validated as an associate, and he's a little slow, right? And I don't mean that to put him down, but he had seizures, so he took phenobarbital, which kind of clouded his mentality a little bit, right? Good dude, a personable guy, man, and cool guy, but just not the sharpest knife in the drawer, if we're being honest. And so he had sort of challenged his validation, but not really, because I think he was kind of hamstrung on how to go about that process. And when I moved into the pod, him and I were the only two people from that affiliation wing, right? Everybody else was emeros. And so I don't think he got a lot of support. In fact, I know that he didn't get a lot of support from the other hermanos and canals that were in the pod. Unfortunately, he was ignored, to be straight up. And that was something I had an issue with, but it's a different story. Check out my Pelican Bay video, and I'll link to it up there, and I talk a little bit about it. But nonetheless, I helped him in challenging his validation, and one of the things he was validated about was he had a tattoo of a huelga bird, right? The farm worker bird, whatever you want to call it, but it's a huelga bird, right? Huelga meaning strike. And it is a bird that has been adopted in, in the last, few decades by Northerners, Norteños, and that movement, right? And that's another story in itself that maybe I'll get into one day. But I had noticed that Tortuga, right, turtle, also had a Welga bird tattooed on him. Now, obviously, as an MA member, he has MA and Black Hand tattooed on him. He didn't have the Welga bird as a gang symbol. He had it as for its cultural value, right, and for its resistance value, right, for its actual true historic meaning. And so, which is understandable. And there's actually a good handful of people from down south of various levels of affiliation that have Welga birds tattooed on them. They tend to be older, right? But anyways, so I got him because his Welga bird looked exactly like this Northerner's Welga bird, right? Same number of steps or wings, whatever you want to call it, head same direction, identical. And was in a relatively similar place on the body, right? On the arm. And so I got at him and I said, hey, check this out. I'm fighting this dude. And the Northerner who I was, helping them with their case actually lived right next door to Tortuga. And truth be told, Turtle didn't like him, right? Because he was a little J-Caddish and sometimes he could be a little immature. And so he would get on Turtle's nerves and I knew that. And I thought that there may be a factor in what I was asking, but it wasn't, apparently. So I get at him, I say, hey, Tortuga, I'm helping this guy fight his validation. And one of the things they're using against him is his tattoo of a Welga bird, right? And they're saying that that Welga bird is a symbol, showing his loyalty to the Nuestra Familia and those that fall up under their leadership, right? I said, but I know you have a Welga bird. He goes, yeah. And I said, he goes, I have it for different reasons, right? Tortuga is a little short dude, right? He said, I have it for different reasons, but yeah, what's up? I said, well, if I can get a signed affidavit from you, right? I said, because you're validated as inmate, right? And I said, if I can get an affidavit from you and stating, hey, I have this Welga bird tattooed on my body, I'm not asking you to admit anything that could get you in trouble, but that could help because you as an emero having that tattoo means that obviously that tattoo in and of itself does not prove that somebody is faithful to the NF because you're not faithful to the NF according to CDC. You're the rival of the NF and you got the same tattoo. And so he was like, yeah, no problem. Right. And he was cool with it. And I really appreciated that. And it showed me a lot about him. Turtle wasn't, he wasn't a very joking guy, at least from my observation, right? Both personal interactions with him and more so witnessing and hearing his interactions with other members, in the section, right? He tended to be a pretty serious guy from what I could tell. And some other inmate dudes had a little comedy to them. You know what I mean? They would crack a joke. I don't think I ever heard Tortuga crack a joke. And he had a temper, right? And I'll kind of leave it at that because it's not my place to put their business out there, right? Even though this is old, you're going back to the early 2000s, you know what I mean? So it's not anything new. But anyways, it showed me a lot about him. And I think it shows how when you're put in these dire situations, right? Which the SHU program is a dire situation, no matter how you want to slice it. And when you're put in these dire situations and you're around people that everybody there was being equally oppressed by the same system, right? Was being equally denied constitutional protections by the same system, was equally labeled, right? With a broad brush. Some people had it coming, some people didn't. by the same system. And while we were supposed to be blood enemies and try to kill each other at every chance we could, um, when it came down to the common opposition, which was the system, then folks would help out and support each other, right? He was under no obligation to do this. He could have brushed it off, right? And he chose not to. And so I respected him for that. I appreciated him for that. Now, for reasons, beyond, the dude's validation did not wind up getting overturned. So when I left, he was still up there. He wasn't a lifer though. So my understanding is he's come home, and I think he's gone back and come back home or whatever. But either way, Tortuga really showed me something, right, about the humanity of folks behind the wall. And we're all equally stripped of our humanity. And so sometimes there's a tendency for us to adopt that same narrative in our opposition to other people that in large part, homes are just like us, right? And the SHU kind of flips that on its head, where not everybody, of course, but a lot of us get to see the humanity in one another, because we're forced to live in these close quarters for long periods of time. You know what I mean? And I think that has a lot to do with it. And the stigma starts to go away. My teaching, my training as a youngster coming up in the system was that these dudes were the devil, right? And they were the #1 opposition. In particular, as you started politicking, they were enemy #1. Now, granted, I never met one until I got validated, right? They weren't running around on the yards back then. I never met a C until I got validated. And so, an NF member. So there was a mystique around all of that. And then I'm put in an environment to live in close quarters with them. And we didn't get all buddy. And I wouldn't say that these guys were my friends. That's probably a bridge too far. If push comes to shove, we were obviously both going to ride with what we represented, right? At whatever cost to anybody else. But in the meantime, when it wasn't active war, active combat, you recognize, hey, this dude ain't so bad, huh? This dude's not so much different than me, right? And it really changed my view. Again, I talked about it a little in my Pelican Bay video, but it really changed my view of that group. Not really. Let me rephrase that. It did not change my view of the inmate as a critical organization, as a criminal organization, right? Or as a quote unquote prison gang or whatever you want to call it. It didn't change my view of the organization, but it did change my view of some individuals that I happened to encounter that subscribe to that identity or that belief system. And I saw them for the men that they were. And I think they saw me for the man that I was. And again, not to say that any of us wouldn't have tried to take the other one's wind if the situation warranted it. But we were respectful to each other. We looked out for each other. And that goes as far as a member of one prison gang saying, hey, I'm clicked up in this, and I got this tattoo, and so does this dude. And you're saying that he's clicked up with something else. So anyways, that's my brief little spiel, man. Help others move in excellence. Help yourself at the same time. That's what homies do, and you're worth it. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Check out the content. I'll link to a bunch of stuff here. And for those that have been around the channel, yes, I've been missing in action for a while, but I'm back.